The ending of How I Met Your Mother is probably ranked as one of the worst endings in television history, alongside the likes of Game of Thrones or even Stranger Things more recently. And there's a reason for that, because after 208 episodes of waiting to see who the mother is, she only appears for fully 8 episodes. And to make things worse, she dies in the final episode. Like, what was the point of that, honestly? But yeah, we go on this journey with Ted for roughly 76 hours, just so that in the last 5 minutes, his wife gets ill and dies. And that sucks. I know it sucks. That's why no one likes it. And the whole series tells you this premise of resilience and being a hopeless romantic, which in the end seems like it pays off as Ted finally finds the love of his life, Tracy. But that reward is short-lived, pun intended, because we barely get to see the happy life that Ted fought so hard to achieve. So in this episode, I will try to play the difficult role of the devil's advocate and try to justify why there might be some logical sense to the ending. Because How I Met Your Mother is a sitcom, and like any other sitcom, it is mainly comedy-driven. We watch it to forget our problems, to escape reality, and to find comfort in fictional characters that make our days better simply by spending 20 minutes with them. But out of all the sitcoms that I've watched, How I Met Your Mother has always had the most realistic moments and has consistently deviated the most from pure comedy. I'm talking about scenes like Marshall losing his dad, Robin rejecting Barney, or Ted getting stood up at the altar. These moments remind us that life isn't all laughs and giggles, that life has its down moments too, and that's what makes it real. That's what makes How I Met Your Mother feel real. Arguably, the final season is the weakest, as it feels the least like How I Met Your Mother. Most of it takes place at the wedding venue, so we don't get to see the show's typical locations like the bar, Ted's apartment, or Barney's office. And on top of that, the characters are separated for most of the season, and that whole storyline with Marshall was frankly a bit meh. And then comes the final episode, where all the build-up feels like it gets thrown away. First, Robin and Barney get divorced. Then, the mother dies, and finally, Ted ends up back together with Robin. This all feels rushed. Very, very rushed, and nonsensical in my opinion. Especially after we've just spent an entire season focused on Robin and Barney's wedding, only for them to get divorced. Like, what was the point of that? And after spending 9 seasons building up the mystery of the mother, she dies in the last 5 minutes. Again, what was the point of that? Like, honestly, why would they even do this? But instead of focusing solely on the structure of the ending, I want to look at the underlying message. Let's try to strip down the meaning of the ending down to its core. Because How I Met Your Mother has always shown that it is more than just a sitcom. It doesn't really only focus on the happy aspects of life. Instead, it teaches some genuinely tough lessons. And for me, that's exactly why How I Met Your Mother has always been the superior sitcom. Yes, I know it has the classic background laugh tracks like The Goated Office doesn't have, and its premise of group of friends is not really original, it's kind of a copy from Friends. But How I Met Your Mother is not afraid to show the darkest sides of life. The loss, the sadness, the betrayal, the toxic relationships, and the childhood traumas. Sure, most of these themes are packaged in a comedic tone, otherwise it wouldn't be classified as a sitcom. But when you analyze each episode to its core, you realize that they all have deeper messages. And maybe that's the entire point of the final episode. I'm not talking about whether it was well produced or well paced, because we've already established that it was rushed and contradicted much of the build-up. I'm talking more about the message itself, because the core idea is that life isn't fair, that things happen to good people, and it's how you respond to those challenges that truly defines you as a person. How I Met Your Mother does not have a happy ending, but most real-life closures aren't happy endings either. And that's the point, because How I Met Your Mother tries to be an accurate representation of reality, both in its highs and its lows. And the ending, unfortunately, is just an example of one of those lows. But don't get me wrong, the ending is sad. But personally, moments like Marshall losing his dad, or Barney's eternal second, or Robin not being able to have biological children, hit harder, at least in the way that they were portrayed. Yes, losing the love of your life and the mother of your children is as bad as it gets, but life is a game of chance, and sometimes the odds are simply not in your favor. Also, I don't necessarily disagree with Ted ending up with Robin, because it's clear that Tracy was the person for Ted, whereas Robin, in this context, is the second best option, and Ted himself is aware of that. Even after facing a tragedy as devastating as losing the love of your life, there's still another alternative. There's still a bit of hope. Yes, Robin won't ever be Tracy, but at least Ted isn't alone. Life was cruel and unfair to him, but he still has someone to live for. It shows that not all hope is lost when the most important person in your life is gone. And I think that that is a very important message worth considering. Again, I think we'll agree that the execution wasn't great, but the message of hope and resilience still remains. And I know what you might say to this. So why even call it How I Met Your Mother if the mom only shows up for one season and Ted ends up with another woman anyways? To that very valid point, I would argue that Ted does indeed end up with a mother, because he lives a long, happy life with Tracy and has 2 children with her. Just because it happens off camera doesn't mean it didn't happen. Her death is completely out of his control, and Ted is not the kind of person who would cheat on her emotionally or otherwise with Robin. Instead, Ted spends the entire series telling his life story to see whether his kids would approve of him moving forward with Robin. I don't see this as disrespectful to the mother. Quite the opposite, in fact. I see it as a demonstration of love towards Tracy. And I know this might sound like a stretch, but please, try to hear me out here. Because the more Ted loved Tracy, the more justification he needed in order to convince himself and to make sure that his kids would approve before trying again with Robin. The fact that it takes him 9 entire seasons to even reach that point shows just how deeply he loved Tracy and how difficult it was for him to move on. Needing his kids' approval is just another sign that he himself wasn't fully convinced and he needed that final push to move on forward with Robin. Also, one could argue that Ted never truly lost his feelings for Robin, it's just that they were dormant while Tracy was alive. In that case, his original intention really was to tell the story of how he met the mother, but he was too hurt to relive the memories he shared with Tracy. So instead, he focuses on the chapters of his life before meeting her. Subconsciously, his underlying feelings for Robin are still in the surface, so his kids pick up on that, which lead them to encourage him to go back to her. Either way, whether it's Ted trying to convince himself that it's time to move on, or simply justifying his feelings for Robin, he spends all this time telling us the story of his life. And I think he chooses to focus on the part of his life before Tracy because he's still grieving and would rather revisit memories that would bring him some joy. We also have to remember that Ted was a widower for 6 years and did not get immediately back with Robin. I don't think he sees Robin as his true love anymore. Maybe at first he did, but after building a life with Tracy, Robin becomes more of the alternative to loneliness. He needs his kids' approval because he still respects Tracy and always will. I agree that the ending might have been better without the whole the mom dies aspect. I don't think this was the best possible ending for such an incredible show, but I'm trying to at least find some justification for it. I'm also aware that the creators had this ending planned for early on, since they had to record scenes with the kids while they were still young. Preventing a story from evolving organically probably wasn't the best creative decision. So, just trying to summarize everything here. While the How I Met Your Mother finale undeniably stumbles in its execution and pacing, it still stays true to what the show has always tried to say beneath the jokes and the laugh tracks, that life doesn't follow neat narrative arcs, and happiness is rarely permanent or perfectly timed. The ending isn't about rewarding Ted or the audience with a fairy tale, but about acknowledging loss, endurance, and the messy reality of moving forward after a tragedy. Ted doesn't erase Tracy or replace her, no. He lives a full, meaningful life with her. He grieves her deeply, and only much later, he allows himself the possibility of connection again. The show may have failed to show that journey properly, but thematically, I think it reinforces the idea that love can exist more than once, that hope can survive grief, and that even when life takes something irreplaceable away, it doesn't mean the story's over. And I think that's beautiful, because even though that is very frustrating for the ending of a sitcom, it's also painfully and uncomfortably human. It's real life. And for better or for worse, that is exactly what How I Met Your Mother has always tried to be. Recording this video was a difficult exercise because I tried to be on the role of the devil's advocate. I don't fully agree with this idea. I think the ending is honestly as bad as it gets, but I'm trying to at least consider the other perspective. And at the end of the day, I think How I Met Your Mother shows a lot of negative aspects of life, something that other sitcoms don't show as much. And therefore, I think the ending is just another representation of one of those low moments in life. I think the ending serves as a very accurate representation of reality, even though I don't agree with it, because it doesn't give us the fairy tale that we all want in real life.